guys, and welcome back to the channel. Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Let's get right into the next two stories. Story number 3, Our Lady's Child. Hard by a great forest dwelt a woodcutter with his wife, who had an only child, a little girl 3 years old. They were so poor, however, that they no longer had daily bread, and did not know how to get food for her. One morning the woodcutter went out sorrowfully to his work in the forest, and while he was cutting wood, suddenly there stood before him a tall and beautiful woman with a crown of shining stars on her head, who said to him, "I am the Virgin Mary, mother of the child Jesus. Thou art poor and needy, bring thy child to me. I will take her with me and be her mother and care for her." The woodcutter obeyed, brought his child, and gave her to the Virgin Mary, who took her up to heaven with her. There the child fared well, ate sugar cakes and drank sweet milk, and her clothes were of gold, and the little angels played with her. And when she was 14 years of age, the Virgin Mary called her one day and said, "Dear child, I am about to make a long journey, so take into thy keeping the keys of the 13 doors of heaven. 12 of these thou mayest open, and behold the glory which is within them. But the 13th, to which this little key belongs, is forbidden thee. Beware of opening it, or thou wilt bring misery on thyself." The girl promised to be obedient, and when the Virgin Mary was gone, she began to examine the dwellings of the kingdom of heaven. Each day she opened one of them, until she had made the round of the 12. In each of them sat one of the apostles, in the midst of a great light, and she rejoiced in all the magnificence and splendor. And the little angels who always accompanied her rejoiced with her. Then the forbidden door alone remained, and she felt a great desire to know what could be hidden behind it, and said to the angels, "I will not quite open it, and I will not go inside it, but I will unlock it so that we can just see a little through the opening." "Oh no," said the little angels, "that would be a sin. The Virgin Mary has forbidden it, and it might easily cause thy unhappiness." Then she was silent, but the desire in her heart was not stilled, but gnawed there and tormented her, and let her have no rest. And when the angels had all gone out, she thought, "Now I am quite alone, and I could peep in. If I do it, no one will ever know." She sought out the key, and when she had got it in her hand, she put it in the lock, and when she had put it in, she turned it round as well. Then the door sprang open, and she saw there the Trinity, sitting in fire and splendor. She stayed there a while, and looked at everything in amazement. Then she touched the light a little with her finger, and her finger became quite golden. Immediately a great fear fell on her. She shut the door violently and ran away. Her terror too would not quite quit her, let her do what she might, and her heart beat continually, and would not be still. A gold too stayed on her finger, and would not go away, let her rub it and wash it never so much. It was not long before the Virgin Mary came back from her journey. She called the girl before her and asked to have the keys of heaven back. When the maiden gave her the bunch, the Virgin looked into her eyes and said, "Hast thou not opened the 13th door also?" "No," she replied. And she laid her head on the girl's heart, and felt how it beat, and saw right well that she had disobeyed her order and had opened the door. Then she said once again, "Art thou certain that thou hast not done it?" "Yes," said the girl, for the second time. Then she perceived the finger which had become golden from touching the fire of heaven, and saw well that the child had sinned, and said for the third time, "Hast thou not done it?" "No," said the girl for the third time. Then said the Virgin Mary, "Thou hast not obeyed me, and besides that thou hast lied. Thou art no longer worthy to be in heaven." Then the girl fell into a deep sleep, and when she awoke she lay in the earth below, and in the midst of a wilderness. She wanted to cry out, but she could bring forth no sound. She sprang up and wanted to run away, but with this thirst soever, she turned herself. She was continually held back by thick hedges of thorns through which she could not break. In the desert in which she was imprisoned, there stood an old hollow tree, and this had to be her dwelling place. Into this she crept when night came, and here she slept. Here, too, she found a shelter from storm and rain, but it was a miserable life, and bitterly did she weep when remembered how happy she had been in heaven, and how the angels had played with her. Roots and wild berries were her only food, and for these she sought as far as she could go. In the autumn she picked up the fallen nuts and leaves and carried them into the hole. The nuts were her food in winter, and when snow and ice came, she crept amongst the leaves like a poor little animal that she might not freeze. Before long her clothes were all torn, and one bit of them after another fell off her. As soon, however, as the sun shone warm again, she went out and sat in front of the tree, and her long hair covered her on all sides like a mantle. Thus she sat year after year, and felt the pain and the misery of the world. One day, when the trees were once more clothed in fresh green, the king of the country was hunting in the forest, and followed a roe. And as it had fled into the thicket which shut in this part of the forest, he got off his horse, tore the bushes asunder, and cut himself a path with his sword. When he had at last forced his way through, he saw a wonderfully beautiful maiden sitting under the tree, and she sat there and was entirely covered with her golden hair, down to her very feet. He stood still and looked at her full of surprise. Then he spoke to her and said, "Who art thou? Why art thou sitting here in the wilderness?" But she gave no answer, but she could not open her mouth. The king continued, "Wilt thou go with me to my castle?" And she just nodded her head a little. The king took her in his arms, carried her to his horse, and rode home with her. And when he reached the royal castle, he caused her to be dressed in beautiful garments, and gave her all things in abundance. Although she could not speak, she was still so beautiful and charming that he began to love her with all his heart, and it was not long before he married her. After a year or so had passed, the queen brought a son into the world. Thereupon the Virgin Mary appeared to her in the night when she lay in her bed alone, and said, "If thou wilt tell the truth and confess that thou didst unlock the forbidden door, I will open thy mouth and give thee back thy speech. But if thou perseverest in thy sin and deniest obstinately, I will take thy newborn child away with me." Then the queen was permitted to answer, but she remained hard and said, "No, I did not open the forbidden door." And the Virgin Mary took the newborn child from her arms and vanished with it. Next morning, when the child was not to be found, it was whispered among the people that the queen was a man-eater and had killed her own child. She heard all this and could say nothing to the contrary, but the king would not believe it, for he loved her so much. When a year had gone by, the queen again bore a son, and in the night the Virgin Mary again came to her and said, "If thou wilt confess that thou openest the forbidden door, I will give thee thy child back and untie thy tongue. But if you continuest in sin and deniest it, I will take away with me this new child also." Then the queen again said, "No, I did not open the forbidden door." And the Virgin took the child out of her arms and away with her to heaven. Next morning, when the child also had disappeared, the people declared quite loudly that the queen had devoured it, and the king's counselors demanded that she should be brought to justice. The king, however, loved her so dearly that he would not believe it, and commanded the conciliars, under pain of death, not to say any more about it. The following year, the queen gave birth to a beautiful little daughter, and for the third time the Virgin Mary appeared to her in the night and said, "Follow me." She took the queen by the hand and led her to heaven, and showed her there her two eldest children, who smiled at her and were playing with the ball of the world. When the queen rejoiced thereat, the Virgin Mary said, Is thy heart not yet softened? If thou wilt own that thou openest the forbidden door, I will give thee back thy two little sons. But for the third time the queen answered, No, I did not open the forbidden door. Then the Virgin let her sink down to earth once more, and took from her likewise her third child. Next morning, when the loss was reported abroad, all the people cried loudly, The queen is a man-eater, she must be judged. And the king was no longer able to restrain his counselors. Thereupon a trial was held, and as she could not answer and defend herself, she was condemned to be burnt alive. The wood was got together, and when she was fast bound to the stake, and the fire began to burn round about her, the hard ice of pride melted her heart, and was moved by repentance, and she thought, If I could but confess before my death that I opened the door. Then her voice came back to her, and she cried out loudly, Yes, Mary, I did it. And straightway rain fell from the sky, and extinguished the flames of fire, and a light broke forth above her, and the Virgin Mary descended with the two little sons by her side, and the newborn daughter in her arms. She spoke kindly to her, and said, He who repents his sins, acknowledges it, is forgiven. Then she gave her the three children, and tied her tongue, and granted her happiness for her whole life. Moral of the story, sometimes it's not bad to tell the truth. Telling the truth may also set you free. And that's the moral. The truth may set you free. Story number 4. The story of the youth who went forth to learn what fear was. A certain father had 2 sons, the elder of whom was smart and sensible, and could do everything. But the younger was stupid and could neither learn nor understand anything. And when people saw him, they said, There's a fellow who will give his father some trouble. When anything had to be done, it was always the elder who was forced to do it. But if his father bade him fetch anything when it was late, or when the night time, and the way led through the churchyard or any other dismal place, he answered, Oh no, father, I'll not go there. It makes me shudder, for he was afraid. Or when stories were told by the fire at night, which made the flesh creep, the listeners sometimes said, Oh, it makes us shudder. The younger sat in the corner and listened with the rest of them. They could not imagine what they could mean. They are always saying, It makes me shudder, it makes me shudder. It does not make me shudder, thought he. That too must be an art of which I understand nothing. Now it came to pass that his father said to him one day, Hearken to me, thou fellow in corner there. Thou art growing tall and strong, and thou not too must learn something by which thou canst earn thy living. Look how thy brother works, but thou dost not even earn thy salt. Well, father, he replied, I am quite willing to learn something indeed. If it could be but managed, I should like to learn how to shudder. I don't understand that at all yet. The older brother smiled when he heard that, and thought to himself, Good God, what a blockhead that brother of mine is. He will never be good for anything as long as he lives. He who wants to be a sickle must bend himself betimes. The father sighed and answered him, Thou shalt soon learn what it is to shudder, but thou wilt not earn thy bread by that. Soon after this the sexton came to the house on a visit, and the father bewailed his trouble, and told him how his younger son was so backward in every respect that he knew nothing and learnt nothing. Just think, said he, when I asked him how he was going to earn his bread, he actually wanted to learn to shudder. If that be all, replied the sexton, he can learn that with me. Send him to me, and I will soon polish him. The father was glad to do it, for he thought it will train the boy a little. The sexton therefore took him into his house, and he had to ring the bell. After a day or two, the sexton awoke him at midnight, and bade him arise and go up into the church tower and ring the bell. Thou shalt soon learn what shuddering is, thought he, and secretly went there before him. And when the boy was at the top of the tower and turned around, and was just going to take hold of the bell rope, he saw a white figure standing on the stairs opposite the sounding hole. "Who is there?" cried he, but the figure made no reply, and did not move or stir. "Give an answer," cried the boy, "or take thyself off. Thou hast no business here at night." The sexton, however, remained standing motionless, that the boy might think he was a ghost. The boy cried a second time, "What do you want here? Speak if thou art an honest fellow, or I will throw thee down the steps." The sexton thought he could intend to be as bad as his words, uttered no sound, and stood as if he were made of stone. Then the boy called to him for the third time, and as that was also to no purpose, he ran against him and pushed the ghost down the stairs, so that it fell down 10 steps and remained lying there in a corner. Thereupon he rang the bell, went home, and without saying a word went to bed and fell asleep. The sexton's wife waited a long time for her husband, but he did not come back. At length she became uneasy and weakened the boy, and asked, "Dost thou not know where my husband is? He climbed up the tower before thou didst." "No, I don't know," replied the boy. But someone was standing with the sounding hole on the other side of the steps, and as he would neither give an answer nor go away, I took him for a scoundrel and threw him downstairs. Just go there and you will see if it was he. I should be sorry if it were." The woman ran away and found her husband, who was lying moaning in the corner, and had broken his leg. She carried him down, and then with loud screams she hastened to the boy's father. "Your boy," cried she, "has been the cause of a great misfortune. He has thrown my husband down the steps and made him break his leg. Take the good-for-nothing fellow away from our house." The father was terrified and ran thither and scolded the boy. "What wicked tricks are these?" said he. "The devil must have put this into thy head." "Father," he replied, "do listen to me. I am quite innocent. He was standing there by night like one who is intending to do some evil. I did not know who it was, and I entreated him 3 times either to speak or to go away. 'Ah,' said the father, 'I have nothing but unhappiness with you. Go out of my sight. I will see thee no more.' 'Yes, father, right willingly. Wait only until it is day, and I will go forth and learn how to shudder, and then I shall, at any rate, understand one art which will support me.' 'Learn what thou wilt,' spake the father. 'It is all the same to me. Here are $50 for thee. Take these and go into the wide world and tell no one from whence thou comest. And who is thy father? For I have no reason to be ashamed of thee.' 'Yes, father, it shall be as you will. If you desire nothing more than that, I can easily keep it in mind.' When day dawned, therefore, the boy put his $50 into his pocket, and went forth on the great highway, and continually said to himself, 'If I could but shudder, if I could but shudder.' Then a man approached who heard this conversation which the youth was holding with himself, and when they had walked a little farther to where they could see the gallows, the man said, 'Look, there is the tree where 7 men have married the rope-maker's daughter, and are now learning how to fly. Sit down below it and wait till night comes, and you will soon learn how to shudder.' 'If that is all that is wanted,' answered the youth, 'it is easily done. But if I learn how to shudder as fast as that, thou shalt have my $50. Just come back to me early in the morning.' Then the youth went to the gallows, sat down below it, and waited till evening came. And as he was cold, he lighted himself a fire. But at midnight the wind blew so sharply that in spite of his fire he could not get warm. And as the wind knocked the hanged men against each other, and they moved backwards and forwards, he thought to himself, 'Thou shiverest below by thy fire, but how those up above must freeze and suffer.' And as he felt pity for them, he raised a ladder and climbed up, unbound one of them after the other, and brought down all 7. Then he stirred the fire, blew it, and set them all round it to warm themselves. But they sat there and did not stir, and the fire caught their clothes. So he said, 'Take care, I will hang you up again.' The dead men, however, did not hear, but were quite silent, and let their rags go on burning. On this he grew angry and said, if you will not take care, I cannot help you. I will not be burnt with you. And he hung them up again, each in his turn. Then he sat down by his fire and fell asleep. And the next morning the man came to him and wanted to have the $50, and said, Well, dost thou know how to shudder? No, answered he. How was I to get to know? Those fellows up there did not open their mouths, and were so stupid that they left the few old rags which they had on their bodies get burnt. Then the man saw that he would not get the $50 that day, and went away, saying, One of this kind has never come my way before. The youth likewise went his way, and once more began to mutter to himself, Ah, if I could but shudder! Ah, if I could but shudder! A wagoner who was striding behind him heard that, and asked, Who are you? I don't know, answered the youth. Then the wagoner asked, From whence comest thou? I know not. Who is thy father, that I may not tell thee? What is it that thou art always muttering between thy teeth? Ah, replied the youth, I do so wish I could shudder, but no one can teach me how to do it. Give up thy foolish chatter, said the wagoner. Come, go with me, I will see about a place for thee. The youth went with the wagoner, and in the evening they arrived at an inn, where they wished to pass the night. Then at the entrance of their room the youth again said quite loudly, If I could but shudder, if I could but shudder. The host, who heard this, laughed and said, If that is your desire, there ought to be a good opportunity for you here. Ah, be silent, said the hostess. So many inquisitive persons have already lost their lives. It would be a pity and a shame if such beautiful eyes as these should never see the daylight again. But the youth said, However difficult it may be, I will learn it, and for this purpose indeed have I journeyed forth. He let the host have no rest until the latter told him that not far from thence stood a haunted castle, where any one could very easily learn what shuddering was, if he would but watch in it for 3 nights. The king had promised that he who would venture should have his daughter to wife, and she was the most beautiful maiden the sun shone on. Great treasures likewise lay in the castle, which were guarded by evil spirits, and these treasures would then be freed, and would make a poor man rich enough. Already many men had gone into the castle, but as yet none had come out again. Then the youth went next morning to the king, and said, if he were allowed, he would watch 3 nights in the haunted castle. The king looked at him and asked the youth, and as the youth pleased him, he said, Thou mayest ask for 3 things to take into the castle with thee, but they must be things without life. Then he answered, Then I ask for a fire, a turning lathe, and a cutting board with a knife. The king had these things carried into the castle for him during the day. When night was drawing near, the youth went up and made himself a bright fire in one of the rooms, placed the cutting board and knife beside it, and seated himself by the turning lathe. Ah, if I could but shudder, said he, but I shall not learn it here either. Towards midnight he was about to poke his fire, and as he was blowing it, something cried suddenly from one corner, Amayo, how cold we are! You simpletons, cried he, what are you crying about? If you are cold, come and take a seat by the fire and warm yourselves. And when he had said that, 2 great black cats came with one tremendous leap, and sat down on each side of him, and looked savagely at him with their fiery eyes. After a short time, when they had warmed themselves, they said, Comrade, shall we have a game at cards? Why not, he replied, but just show me your paws. Then they stretched out their claws. Oh, said he, what long nails you have! Wait, I must first cut them for you. Thereupon he seized them by the throats, put them on the cutting board, and screwed their feet fast. I have looked at your fingers, said he, and my fancy for card playing has gone. And he struck them dead, and threw them out into the water. But when he had made away with these 2, and was about to sit down again by his fire, out from every hole and corner came black cats, and black dogs with red-hot chains, and more of them came until he could no longer stir, and they yelled horribly and got on his fire, pulled it to pieces, and tried to put it out. He watched them for a while quietly, but at last, when they were going too far, he seized his cutting knife and cried, "Away with ye, vermin!" and began to cut them down. Part of them ran away, the others he killed, and threw out into the fish pond. When he came back, he fanned the embers of his fire again and warmed himself. And as he thus sat, his eyes would keep open no longer, and he felt a desire to sleep. Then he looked round and saw a great bed in the corner. "That is the very thing for me," said he, and got into it. When he was just going to shut his eyes, however, the bed began to move of its own accord, and went over to the whole of the castle. "That's right," said he, "but go faster." Then the bed rolled on as if 6 horses were harnessed to it, up and down over thresholds and steps. But suddenly, hop, hop, it turned over upside down and lay on him like a mountain. But he threw quilts and pillows up in the air and got out and said, Now anyone who likes may drive," and lay down by his fire and slept till it was day. In the morning the king came, and when he saw him lying there on the ground, he thought the evil spirits had killed him and he was dead. Then said he, "After all, it is a pity. He is a handsome man." The youth heard it, got up and said, "It has not come to that yet." Then the king was astonished, but very glad, and asked how he had fared. "Very well, indeed," answered he. "One night is past, the 2 others will get over likewise." Then he went to the innkeeper, who opened his eyes very wide, and said, "I never expected to see thee alive again. Hast thou learnt how to shudder yet?" "No," said he, "it is all in vain, if someone would but tell me." The second night he went up into the old castle, sat down by the fire, and once more began his old song, "If I could but shudder." When midnight came, an uproar and noise of tumbling about was heard. At first it was low, but it grew louder and louder. Then it was quiet for a while, and at length, with a loud scream, half a man came down the chimney and fell before him. "Hollo!" cried he. "Another half belongs to this. This is too little." Then the uproar began again. There was a roaring and howling, and the other half fell down likewise. "Wait," said he, "I will just blow up the fire a little for thee." When he had done that and looked round again, the 2 pieces were joined together, and a frightful man was sitting in his place. "That is no part of our bargain," said the youth. "The bench is mine." The man wanted to push him away. The youth, however, would not allow that, but thrust him off with all his strength, and seated himself again in his own place. Then still more men fell down, one after the other. They brought 9 dead men's legs and 2 skulls, and set them up, and played at ninepins with them. The youth also wanted to play, and said, "Hark you, can I join you?" "Yes, if thou hast any money." "Money enough," replied he, "but your balls are not quite round." Then he took the skulls and put them in the lathe, and turned them till they were round. "There now, they will roll better," said he. "Hooray! Now it goes merrily." He played with them and lost some of his money, but when it struck 12, everything vanished from his sight. He lay down and quietly fell asleep. Next morning the king came to inquire after him. "How has it fared with you this time?" asked he. "I have been playing at ninepins," he answered, "and have lost a couple of farthings." "Hast thou not shuddered then?" What?" said he. "I have made merry, if I did but know what it was to shudder." The third night he sat down again on his bench, and said quite sadly, "If I could but shudder." When it grew late, 6 tall men came in and brought a coffin. Then said he, "Ha ha, that is certainly my little cousin, who died only a few days ago." And he beckoned with his finger, and cried, "Come, little cousin, come." They placed the coffin on the ground, but when he went to it, and took the lid off, and a dead man lay therein, he felt his face, but it was cold as ice. "Stop," said he, "I will warm thee a little," and went to the fire and warmed his hand, and laid it on the dead man's face, but he remained cold. Then he took him out, and sat down by the fire, and laid him on his breast, and rubbed his arms, that the blood might circulate again. As this also did no good, he thought to himself, "When 2 people lie in bed together, they warm each other," and carried him to the bed, covered him over, and lay down by him. After a short time the dead man became warm too, and began to move. Then said the youth, "See, little cousin, have I not warmed thee?" The dead man, however, got up and cried, Now will I strangle thee. What, said he, is that the way thou thinkest me? Thou shalt at once go into thy coffin again. And he took him up, threw him into it, and shut the lid. Then came the 6 men and carried him away again. I cannot manage to shudder, said he. I shall never learn it here as long as I live. Then a man who was taller than all others and looked terrible. He was old, however, and had a long white beard. Thou wretch, cried he, thou shalt soon learn what it is to shudder, for thou shalt die. Not so fast, replied the youth. If I am to die, I shall have a say in it. I will soon seize thee, said the fiend. Softly, softly, do not talk so big. I am as strong as thou art, and perhaps even stronger. We shall see, said the old man. If thou art stronger, and will let thee go. Come, we will try. Then he led him by dark passages to a smith's forge, took an axe, and with one blow struck an anvil to the ground. I can do better than that, said the youth, and went to the other anvil. The old man placed himself near and wanted to look on, and his white beard hung down. Then the youth seized the axe, split the anvil with one blow, and struck the old man's beard with it. Now I have thee, said the youth. Now it is thou who will have to die. Then he seized an iron bar and beat the old man till he moaned, and entreated him to stop, and he would give him a great riches. The youth drew out the axe to let him go. The old man led him back into the castle, and in a cellar showed him 3 chests full of gold. Of these, said he, one part is for the poor, the other for the king, the third is thine. In this meantime it struck 12, and the spirit disappeared. The youth therefore was left in darkness. I shall still be able to find my way out, said he, and he felt about, found the way into the room, and slept there by his fire. Next morning the king came and said, Now thou must have learnt what shuddering is? No, he answered. What can it be? My dear cousin was here, and a bearded man came and showed me a great deal of money down below, but no one told me what it was to shudder. Then said the king, Thou hast delivered the castle, and shalt marry my daughter. That is all very well, said he, but I still do not know what it is to shudder. Then the gold was brought up and the wedding celebrated. But howsoever much the young king loved his wife, and however happy he was, he still said always, If I could but shudder, if I could but shudder. And at last she was angry at this. Her waiting maid said, I will find a cure for him. He shall soon learn what it is to shudder. She went out to the stream which flowed through the garden, and had a whole bucket full of gudgeons brought to her. At night, when the young king was sleeping, his wife was to draw the clothes off him and empty the bucket full of cold water with the gudgeons in it over him, so that the little fishes would sprawl about him. When this was done, he woke up and cried, Oh, what makes me shudder so? What makes me shudder so? Dear wife, ah, now I know what it is to shudder. The end. Don't make a wish, because sometimes your wishes could come true in the worst of ways. Alright guys, I'm going to upload this. Look forward to it, and look forward to the next 2. Peace out, guys.